We're now going to have a panel about the State of Energy Innovation report that IEA published yesterday. But before we do that, let's look at the top lessons from that report before we have a conversation with our excellent panel next.
The 2025 Nobel Prize in Economics was awarded for showing that long-term economic growth comes from a continuous cycle of innovation, where new ideas and technologies replace old ones. And in the energy sector, there are many additional reasons to innovate.
We surveyed over 270 experts from around the world about what they believe drives innovations in energy today. And in 2025, energy security was clearly cited as the #1 driver.
But what drives energy innovation also depends on who you ask. Businesses want efficiency, governments seek growth, and energy-poor regions look to expand energy access.
What is driving energy innovation, and what can governments, investors and innovators do to act where it matters the most? The IEA's annual State of Energy Innovation report brings together all relevant information that the IEA collects in one place to identify where progress is accelerating and where it is falling behind. Innovation progress cannot be measured through one single number. The innovation ecosystem of research, inventions and large-scale investment is shaped by scientists, policymakers, entrepreneurs and financiers who all respond to different short-term and long-term incentives.
This year's edition reveals a concerning trend. After years of growth, funding for energy innovation appears to be slowing. Global public energy R&D spending, for example, dropped in 2024 compared to its high in 2023, and all data available for 2025 show a similar trend.
Venture capital investments in energy technology startups also declined in 2024 and then fell again in 2025 for the third year straight, as AI absorbed 1/3 of all venture capital funding. Corporate energy R&D spending grew at its lowest rate since 2015, by just 1% in 2024. With the exception of renewable and power grid equipment suppliers, energy-related sectors allocated an equal or lower share of revenue to R&D.
At a time where energy security considerations are front and centre and a key motivator for innovation, this is a worrying trend. When geopolitical concerns over energy were at historical highs in the early 1980s, IEA member governments invested around 0.1% of their GDP on energy R&D. A seemingly small share, but one that has delivered many of the energy innovations we rely on today. Today, that share is only 0.05%. The trend is not uniform across countries. Some regions are approaching similar investment levels to those seen in the early 1980s. Notably Europe, which has boosted the share of GDP it spends on energy R&D in recent years. Elsewhere, only China reaches a comparable level of public energy R&D spending.
One challenge of public R&D policy is that the benefits of spending typically only reveal themselves in hindsight. The lithium-ion battery is a good example. Its invention was underpinned by public funding around 1980 and was followed by many research successes in public laboratories. Today, the annual market for this battery technology is worth $130 billion, as lithium-ion battery packs power everything from smartphones to electric vehicles and grid-scale energy storage.
Batteries look to be a disruptive technology for the energy sector and beyond, and battery innovation is accelerating further. Battery patents accounted for almost half of all energy technology patents in 2023, an unprecedented share for a single technology. Preliminary data for 2024 show that this share is set to further increase. Battery innovation is now a common priority for many countries, even if their innovation portfolios are otherwise tailored to their needs and their comparative advantages.
The energy sector remains an innovation powerhouse. 1 in 10 patents worldwide is related to energy, putting energy ahead of transport, chemicals, and pharmaceuticals.
The largest country for energy technology patents today is China, which has overtaken the United States, Japan, and Europe in recent years.
Energy innovators made big strides forward in 2025. IEA analysts have identified more than 150 notable advances in energy innovation last year. Over 50 emerging technologies moved closer to commercialization.
For 2026, we identified 3 main priority areas for action. There is a renewed interest in innovation as an engine for competitiveness and resilience. Delivering requires strategic decisions, aligning R&D and finance with industrial opportunities, targeting supply chain weaknesses, and accepting the risks that come with pushing out the technology frontier.
There is increasing competition between AI and energy for venture capital. Here, we need a clear-sighted view of the funding gaps to ensure that energy projects that promise long-term impacts can succeed.
Strong partnerships are crucially important. At a time of geopolitical challenges, it would be especially important for researchers, entrepreneurs, and first-of-a-kind project developers to be able to connect with ambitious customers, funders, and partners so that the pace of progress stays high.
The IEA will continue to shine light on the forces shaping energy innovation, to help governments, investors, and innovators to act where it matters most.
With that, let me welcome to the stage the excellent panelists to discuss the State of Energy Innovation Report. Minister Hodson, Minister of Energy and Natural Resources for Canada, Minister Ausland, Minister of Energy for Norway, Minister Wandai, Minister of Energy and Petroleum for Kenya, and Stephen Rowan, the Vice President of European Patent Office. Please join the stage. Thank you. Let me start with Minister Hodson. Very recently, in the past few months, Canada has put out a climate and competitiveness strategy. Can you talk us through your thinking behind that strategy? What are the key points and how do they feed into the constraints on innovation that are clearly being highlighted?
Sure, thank you. So I think the real driver was a view that we are not going to constrain or shrink our way to energy transition. We're going to have to grow our way to energy transition, and we're not going to be successful telling our citizens you can't have X because we need to reduce carbon footprints. We're going to need to use technology. We're going to need to use innovation to get there. I was really taken by some of the comments of the previous panelists. What we're trying to do is create policy frameworks and create tools to help make that transition and to help move from innovation to scaled deployment. So in Canada, I was thinking of a couple of examples where we are building the first commercial SMRs in the developed world. We're building 4 of them next to our large-scale reactors in Darlington. And we had to use some real policy tools to get there. We have a tool called the Canada Infrastructure Bank, which deploys capital for scale projects, commercial projects, where you can use concessionary capital to make technology affordable when you are moving in the innovation scale. And we have a specific tool that's dedicated to that use. And I think part of the question you had from government about you have to name what you're actually trying to do with the capital as opposed to just throw capital at it. So we have a specific tool around it. Will earn a concessionary return, but its job is to help bring new technologies to scale and make it affordable when deployed to ratepayers. We also have a tool because getting commercial enterprises who need to earn a return on capital to take first of a kind risk. They're not VCs. They don't get paid. Their shareholders fire them if it doesn't work. So we have a specific tool called the Canada Growth Fund, which is designed to take first of a kind risk to take things from experimental or demonstration to commercial reality. So those two particular tools are part of our competitiveness strategy. We also think about, so we're now producing LNG. We have the lowest carbon intensity LNG in the world. We're proud of that. We think we will ultimately be a differentiator. Today, people won't pay for it. We think in the future, people will. But we designed our investment tax credits so they scale towards the carbon intensity of the LNG that's produced. And that's been very successful. In terms of critical minerals and getting the critical minerals developed that we need for energy transition, we have problems with supply chains. We think we all understand that. We passed something called our Defense Procurement Act, where we will create stockpiles and have the government step in and create those stockpiles. That creates a certainty of demand to get critical minerals processing facilities and mines up and running. The last example I'll use is we're working on the largest CCUS project in the world. It's called the Pathways Project. It would decarbonize the intensity of our entire oil sands industry. It would take 16 million tons per annum of carbon out of the system. That requires policy changes. That requires new kinds of uses of contract for differences. That requires new kinds of investment tax credits. But we're doing that because we believe that ultimately, if we produce lower carbon intensity products, that will make us competitive in the world. So we think about everything from this competitive lens.
There's lots I want to come back to, but let's hear from Minister Ausland. Norway and Canada in some way share one part of their economy, which is both have lots of fossil fuels that you are able to extract and export and help the economy grow. But in Norway's case, the history of trying to combine the resources that you have alongside the policies that you've deployed since the 1990s, scaling up carbon capture and storage in the mid-90s, the things that Norway has done that other countries look up to. But those are now past successes. What are you looking at today that you can drive in innovation from Norway?
Thank you for the question, and it's good to be here. First of all, I think we build on the history. The Norwegian economy is fueled by renewable energy. Our first modern industrial development at the beginning of the 20th century was based on large-scale hydropower. And then we get oil and gas. And for more than 50 years with oil and gas, who have been the backbone of the industry economy, local communities, and welfare state, the sector has been on the forefront of innovation and technology development that have spread to other industries. For example, within aerospace, medicine, carbon capture and storage, as you mentioned, and floating offshore wind. We need to meet the world's rising energy needs, give citizens and businesses access to affordable energy, and to deal with the environmental and climate challenges. That means research and innovation is more important than ever. Our approach has been steady. The Norwegian government supports research and development across the entire chain, from basis research to market introduction of new technologies and solutions. And let me use carbon capture and storage as an example. We have for more than a decade prioritized research, development, and deployment on solutions needed for CCS to work as a value chain. Longship, our full-scale demonstration project, started operation last summer. Through the Longship project, we addressed market failures in technology development and coordination problems in the value chain for CCS. And now Norway is ready to store more CO2. Industrial players at the Norwegian continental shelf are ready to move forward when European customers commit to store their CO2. What's needed for CO2 storage to grow faster is to have more large customers in Europe stepping forward and commit economically to store CO2. And the R&D strategy for our public support is to develop in close collaboration with the energy community and businesses. This is a key point as it enables us to design research calls that target the challenges faced by industry. To do so, we have established a new strategic body called Energy 2050, which consists of representatives from universities, technical research institutes, public authorities, and which is led by representatives from the Norwegian energy industry. And Energy 2050 is currently working on the new research and innovation strategy, which includes both electricity and petroleum activities, as well as seabed minerals. The strategy will be delivered later this year, and I think that will also be the focus for the innovation and R&D development in Norway in the future.
Yeah, that's a great platform. Again, I'd come back to you on follow-up questions, but before that, Minister Wandai, we heard from entrepreneurs in Kenya in the little video that we had before. Now, I grew up in India. I understand developing country challenges very well. Kenya has its own challenges. It has energy access challenges that it needs to meet. But the IEA's report also points out that developing countries can increase their spend on energy innovation to their benefit. You take that conclusion. How do you apply it to a country like Kenya that has to deal with so many other things, but could use innovation to progress on those goals?
Thank you very much. First and foremost, Kenya's innovation leadership, especially on the African continent, is a result of deliberate policy guidance and design, strong institutions, and market enabling frameworks. But I must hasten to add from the outset that financing and scale constraints still remain the biggest barriers across Africa. As a matter of fact, in terms of policy, Kenya took a deliberate decision early enough to first and foremost to establish a robust legal framework. And this was by way of enacting the very, very progressive Energy Act in 2019, which legislation has been able to guide our innovation and all aspects of energy in the country. Secondly, is the energy policy. We have a very clear energy policy, which was first developed in 2018, but we have since revised it to cover the period 2025-2034. Of course, this policy prioritizes clean energy, access, enhancement, and of course, participation by all stakeholders. The third is what has come to be known as the least cost power development plan. Now, the least cost power development plan, of course, ensures that we have got long-term investment planning, not only in generation, but all aspects of energy landscape. In terms of investment, the Kenyan government took a deliberate step to enhance public investment in high-risk innovation, and this especially in geothermal. Yes, we have been able as a country to invest substantial amount of resources in de-risking the geothermal space by way, of course, undertaking geothermal exploration. This therefore enables would-be private investors to come in with the fair sense of certainty. Yes, without this, we would have been where we are. As we speak, our geothermal energy accounts for more than 45% of electricity in the country. And this is an area that continues to offer very, very good promises. And of course, with much more investments from the public and the government. 3 is enabling market and digital innovation. The country has been able to open up electricity generation to independent power producers. And this has really helped in terms of bridging the gap between generation and demand. Without this, it would have been impossible for us to be able to meet the demand for electricity in the country. Of course, this also provides enabling supporting frameworks for mini-grids and off-grid markets. As I've said, the challenge is funding, okay? We continue to experience serious constraints in funding, not only in Kenya, but across the continent. And this is an area that would require a lot more attention moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Rowan, you know, you work at the European Patent Office. You know, patents are, as an indicator of innovation, a key indicator. Quantitatively, not always qualitatively, but certainly quantitatively. And you know, when we look at trends on patent filing globally, we have seen, as we have seen in other sectors, China's rise in energy patents, especially, you know, let alone other areas. So when you are looking at it from the you know, European Patent Office's point of view and your conversations with the International Energy Agency, you know, what do these trends say, and how can that trend allow for the innovation ecosystem to learn lessons?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you very much to the IAA for inviting the European Patent Office here, and I'm obviously very pleased to represent them. I think it's there's a phrase in English which is you feel like the vicar in the church preaching to the choir, because I think everyone here knows about the essential element of patents in encouraging innovation, encouraging that investment and rewarding that investment. And maybe I'll touch on that a bit, but I think that role is changing, and it's interesting that the previous panelists, it really came through that role is changing. And then, as you said, you know, the report that we've just assisted the IAA with, really looking then at the huge explosion, literally, in batteries that we see. Hopefully no exploding batteries, but we see the explosion in battery technology and storage technology. But as you said, we also see the change in the global players. So I think if we look at the innovation system and the way that patents play in that role, you know, they've always had that role. We saw it on the graph. Businesses, but also policymakers in government, they look for economic growth. They look for increased competitiveness. And then it was a bit like the comment made about the reason for things changing their clothes or having to put a new jacket on. You know, more recently then, we really saw that the climate change and sustainability were really key drivers of the innovation. And again, we saw that on that pie chart. What we've seen more recently is that strategic importance of patents, particularly in areas of key technology. And again, energy, as we all know, it underpins all the other technologies. So it's absolutely crucial. But there are the other technologies as well, AI, computer-implemented inventions, but also communication, where interoperability is important. So we see that the governments are taking far more interest now from a resilience point of view, from a sustainability point of view, from a self-sufficiency point of view, in the way in which innovation is taking place. So it's no longer purely about the economics, which it has been before. It's more then about also about a strategically important topic for governments, both regionally and also nationally. And that obviously brings quite a more intense spotlight on patents. I mean, patents some people might say boring. You know, we sit there in the patent office looking at applications. Suddenly, policymakers are interested in what's happening in the patent space. And of course, we're sat on 2.2 billion technical documents, which are the public documents once the patent is published. So that's a hugely rich database. And that's where we've been working with the IAEA on reports like this to really help shine a light on what that data shows. There were some flash screens of some of the things that we call cartographies, which really drill down. Where are the movers and shakers? Where are the areas which are growing? Where are the areas which may be declining? I was talking to somebody outside about 3D printing, which we saw a massive explosion in applications a couple of years ago. Now not so much, because the real focus is on energy. As the report said, energy overtook all the other areas of technology in 2020, so it now accounts for 11%, which is a big share of the patent space. Primarily batteries, that's nearly 50% on batteries, but there are other areas of technology which are also developing. And as you said, we also see the huge growth in China. You mentioned China's growth in other areas. Our number 2 applicant last year was Huawei. It was number 1 the year before. And so telecommunications is obviously really important, but we see CATL, BYD, etc., really increasing. And if we look at China's patent growth in the EPO over the last 10 years, it's around 200% growth, but in energy technologies, it's 800% growth.
Wow.
So we see the investments. We saw the lithium-ion development, which I think is a good example where it showed how Europe really led the way. Then Japan took over. Now we see the real developments coming from China, but also in more sustainable batteries such as sodium-ion, solid-state batteries. And I think those are the areas where, again, we're seeing that big increase. But it's not just, as we saw with the presentation, we're seeing really advanced nuclear fission patents coming in, photovoltaic cells, carbon capture, which was mentioned by the Deputy Prime Minister of the Netherlands as well. And what we're trying to do is to really bring those so that people can actually see them through our reports that we've been doing, some with the IEA, some with others, but there's a whole number of reports out there which I think really hopefully help people understand what's happening in the technology space.
Right. Well, so I have lots of follow-ups, and maybe I'll just start in reverse order because it's easier. How does the work that you do, the reports that you put out, feed into policy making and decision making at the European level, right? You're seeing all these trends very clearly and some of them stark. Can you give examples of where that's happened?
Yeah, I think, if we're looking at the reports that we do, it's really about helping the policymakers make an informed choice. The EPO is a technical organization, but we recognize that we were sat on huge amounts of data, which is quite impenetrable. There are some 230,000 separate classification codes that patent examiners use. Everyone in this room probably wouldn't understand them. So we needed to make it that people could understand. So we developed platforms, we developed the reports, and we've also also developed the Deep Tech Finder. We've talked about venture capitalist investment, which might come up, but we've catalogued over 11,000 startups in Europe to look at seeing how we can help get that venture capital to them. I think if we're looking at concrete examples, the one thing that's already come up, it's been mentioned, the Draghi and the Letter reports, it is about having the coherent framework, and a patent system is part of that. So Letter and Draghi recommended the unitary patent, full rollout of the unitary patent, also targeted investment, which we're seeing. So we're working also with the European Innovation Council, the IEC, to try and help them then again make informed decisions. So we're doing reports for them on the venture capital investments that they should be making as part of that, to really try and drive innovation. So we don't just foster innovation with the patent system, but we actually drive and actively support it.
Right. And Minister Wandai, one of the things that is usually thought of from a developing country perspective is that you take innovation from developed countries and then apply it in developing countries. And of course, you have to adapt those and you have to find ways to innovate within it. But we could also think of examples where the reverse has happened, where innovation from developing countries has been applicable in developed countries. You mentioned off-grid and mini-grid solutions. I don't want to limit you to the areas, but feels to me when I'm looking at rich country problems right now, electricity, grid, and the bottlenecks around supply are very important. Are there lessons from your work on mini-grids and off-grids that could be used in developed country context?
Well, yeah, it is true indeed that most of the innovative work that we continue to undertake has been initiated elsewhere. But I must hasten to add that by adopting these innovations and also actually improving on them, we have been able to make very, very bold steps in terms of addressing the key issues, which is, of course, ensuring sustainable access to electricity, of course, ensure that the electricity and the energy is renewable, and most importantly, it's affordable. Yeah, so all these put together point to the fact that there must continue to be collaborative efforts between ourselves and other countries. And when it comes to Africa itself, we are focusing more and more in terms of expanding regional cooperation and integration of our activities. This would therefore help us in ensuring that even as we move forward, we don't move in isolation. And this is very, very important. So all in all, is that our work in the energy space as a country and as a people is, of course, governed by what's happening elsewhere. But we have to tailor it to make to become relevant to our needs and systems, and of course our culture. Yeah.
Thank you. And Minister Ausland, you brought up the Longship and the latest carbon capture project. But if you look at, and you said, you use the historical work that you've done as a way of driving these projects. One thing that has been a success story for Norway as a history is long-term policy support. You've had a carbon price for a long time and a high enough carbon price to allow technologies like carbon capture to have a business model. Your policy oriented towards electric cars, and the fact that now 100% of the cars that are sold in Norway are electric happen because of consistent long-term support. What allows, because this is not something that every other government is able to do, what is it that allows for, despite political differences which exist in Norway as much as they exist in other places, to allow that kind of long-term policy to actually exist in a democracy where there is robust political debate?
I think, first of all, it's about focusing in some areas that we believe on. You mentioned electric cars. We want to introduce the electric cars for the market and have a long-term framework and a broad political solutions for supporting electric cars in the Norwegian transport system. And also for the carbon capture and storage. There's a broad political enthusiasm for developing that kind of solutions. So I think the long-term framework to pointing out some technologies that we see are coming is quite important. And when we're talking about carbon capture and storage, when we now can show the world that the Longship and the value chain of carbon capture and storage is functioning, I'm quite proud of what we have done in Norway, because we have focused on the technology development and testing, having a world's largest test center for carbon capture and storage, capture technology in Mongstad, Technology Center Mongstad. And when we can catch CO2 from a cement plant that is over 100 years old now today, it's the experience and the technology that have bring it on the table from the Technology Center Mongstad. So a long-term commitment to new technologies, new solutions is quite important. And I think broad political solutions to stand to a kind of a development is quite important. The challenge is today to have long-term commitment for new technologies is that the political debate have changed a lot during the last 4 or 5 years. So it's more difficult now. But in Norway, we will contribute to develop the oil and gas sector and the innovation and the new technologies that come in the oil and gas sector. We want to focus on the carbon capture and storage. The electric cars and the electricity society is quite important. And also new renewable energy sources, for example, floating offshore wind, where I think Norway and the Norwegian industry have experience that we can use in the future. So long-term commitment is really important.
Well, maybe just one quick follow-up on that. You talked about the two big examples in carbon capture and electric cars. The strategic thinking is very different. In carbon capture and storage, you're building out an industry alongside the industries that already exist, and you want to become the hub for carbon dioxide that could be brought in from other places into Norway. On electric cars, you've picked a lane. You are not worried about trying to bring electric car manufacturing to Norway. You are focused on very much deploying the technologies that exist. You're open to anybody that allows the best technology to come into the country. You know, that what does that tell people about how to think about deploying a new technology and how to be strategic about it?
First of all, back in 2008, 10, we also looking into how we can build electric cars in Norway. It was not a success. We have some cars that we call the Tink,
Right.
small car, not a long range for driving. And then Tesla come as a full-blood sports car. And we introduced it for the Norwegian market, for the Norwegian people, because we want to bring down the emissions from the transport sector. And that was the main reason that we did it. And the broad solutions in the parliament also supported that. So that's the history of the electric cars. Now we are phasing out the subsidies of the electric cars because the market is there and it's well functioning. When we're talking about carbon capture and storage, offshore, floating offshore wind, I think that also is a focus that is supported from the industry in Norway. We can build a new competence, we can build stronger businesses in a new situation. So carbon capture and storage, and also floating offshore wind, maybe blue hydrogen will also be important for the Norwegian industry. And they have experience long back in the history to also taking the right steps forward, I think, when we're thinking about science, technology development. And the framework for our R&D target the next years in the Energy 2050 will be that, to bring together the fossil sector, also oil and gas sector, and the renewable sector, and also the industries, how we can develop the opportunity that we have in Norway in the future.
Right. Minister Hodson, maybe a similar question on picking a lane, right? A country, especially the size of Norway or size of Canada, with at least the economic heft, there is a temptation to want to do all things because it's possible. There are innovators within countries that might be allowing to do it. But you have picked certain aspects in the competitiveness strategy. You're talking about SMRs, for example, or the carbon capture project. You know, what goes into making that decision, and you know, how do you handle the people who are interested in other technologies and making sure that the strategic technologies get long-term support?
Well, one of the, I think one of the previous panelists used the word smorgasbord. I think we don't have the luxury of having religion on a particular technology when you have a country that's the second largest landmass in the world, where you have 80% of our country incredibly urbanized, but 20% of our country, you know, the average commute when you drive is an hour and a half. Telling someone when it's 30 below 0 centigrade and you're driving 3 hours a day that you can only use an electric vehicle doesn't work, and that creates political discourse that isn't helpful to getting to transition. I think what we have to say to people, and what we're doing in Canada, is saying we recognize there are differences. There's a difference between an urban community and a rural community. There's a difference between regions in our country that are incredibly rich in hydroelectricity and the prairie regions of our country, which are very flat. Hydro doesn't work there. So we're actually doing a smorgasbord and trying to be regionally aware and constructive. We have 13 different provinces and territories. Many of those provinces are the size of multiple European countries. So we do need to have a smorgasbord. We're not dictating thou shalt use wind, thou shalt use solar, thou shalt use SMRs. It's really designed, and then using those tools that I talked about, the tools for first of a kind risk, the tools for helping make large new increments of generation affordable, encouraging in our VC chain the Series A, Series B, Series C, where we might not have as much robust VC activity as some other places. It's trying to use those tools to deal with the regional differences.
Right.
Hope that answers your question.
One question, especially to the minister, but maybe Mr. Rowan, you might have thoughts on it too. We saw a very important chart on R&D spending. It's down across the board. It's down on public R&D spending, it's down on corporate R&D spending, and even venture capital on the whole is down. We saw 2024 numbers, but we also got an insight into 2025 numbers, which look to continue the downward trend. What is it that you as a minister looking at this can do to try and increase R&D spend, both in public sector, which I understand sometimes purses are tight, but also in the corporate sector, where we know that feeds into competitiveness of those industries? Maybe I can start with you and we can go in that order.
Well, one of the big things is investment tax credits, and one of the things we've done is, for particularly emerging technologies, making them refundable, which in essence turns them into grants, because you can't tell someone to rely on investment tax credits if they're not yet profitable. So tax policy, and then trying to create these pools of capital like our Canada Growth Fund, like our investment bank, like our venture capital stuff that's done out of our business development bank. It's trying to find tools that encourage as much as possible private sector capital formation. The other thing we're really trying to do is create more policy certainty. I know it was suggested rip up the spreadsheets. What I always found when I was in boardrooms and you're trying to allocate capital is it's a heck of a lot easier to get people to allocate capital if, when they're running their spreadsheets, they know if they can put first revenue in year 1 or year 3 or year 5 or year 7. And when governments don't create the regulatory certainty, so they don't know where to plug in that revenue number, you can't calculate your IRR, you can't calculate your NPV, you can't calculate your payback period. So, I think one of the things we said as a government is we were going to stop as a government questioning whether we were going to do these things. We were going to start saying, how do we do these things? How do we do these things in a predictable manner so the private sector can actually, because I think they still will use spreadsheets, can actually put a number in a predictable year for first revenue, have a predictable price of carbon if it's something like that. And I think governments kind of lost sight of that over the last several years. They were so into, is this good, is this good? They weren't creating any kind of policy certainty. You commented on one of the things that was really good about Norway was the long-term policy certainty. I think in Canada we started asking ourselves, should we? And it created too much policy uncertainty and made it hard for people to allocate capital. So we're really trying to push back hard on creating policy certainty so the private sector can put money to work.
Right. And Minister Osland, same. what are you doing to try and increase R&D spending both in public and private areas?
First of all, it have been a challenge to increase the R&D money from a public side. But one of my focus areas the next 4 years is to increase the public also use of R&D. Because I think in the energy sector we have a special good experience with smaller R&D forums that develop technologies for special issues. For example, hydrogen. We also have success with how we can manage the grid and the grid capacity. We have a successful industry that have developed new monitoring systems for how we can use the grid system from maybe useful 60%, 70% to 90% is a quite interesting thing. So I think small forums that bring together industries, the scientists, environment, and so on is really good, and we have good experience with it in Norway. And I think to also have the businesses and the private sector to get more money in the R&D sector, we have to develop it together in a kind of opportunities that we are creating together. So that's maybe one of the main focus that we will have the next 4 years.
Right, great. And Mr. Minister Vandai, so we talked about a little bit about geothermal. You mentioned a little bit about direct air capture, but that's you have private sector interest in those new technologies growing in Kenya. But what do you do to try and increase public R&D spending, which for a developing country constraints are different, but it is something that can, as the IEA report shows, can pay back 100 times or more. How do you make the case for more energy R&D spending at least at the public level?
Firstly, it's important to point out that Kenya's priorities reflect a broader African vision. That is energy systems that are secure, are reliable, affordable, and inclusive. But more importantly, faced with the reality of constrained fiscal space, especially in the budgetary framework, the government of Kenya has taken it upon itself to prioritize creating an enabling environment for the private sector to inject its capital into R&D and the energy sector in general. We have gone further and now embraced private-public partnerships, which is, in our view, the way to go, so that as we move forward, we move in a manner that is sustainable, based on the reality of the constraints we have with us. Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, do you have any thoughts, Mr. Rohn, on the fact that R&D spending, especially with just looking at the patent data, kind of tells you the downward trend you would have predicted showing up before the IEA reports, because you would have seen the numbers change. So yeah, are there ways in which you've seen? I mean, there's been an uptick in the EU, for example, on energy spending, energy R&D spending. That what kind of lessons allowed that sort of decision to go through?
Yeah, I mean, on the public sector side, what the positive thing to say to people involved in making those decisions in governments or regionally is they do have an impact. So if we take the Norwegian example with wind, we see the impact of that in Norway being strong on wind, Spain being strong on wind. The Deputy Prime Minister of the Netherlands mentioned carbon capture. We see that coming through as well. So where governments are making, or regions are making policy decisions, so they're regulating, or else they're making investment decisions with public money, it does come through then into the innovation. The real sort of elephant in the room, which was mentioned by the panel, is that if we look at Europe, Europe produces the greatest scientific papers. Number-wise, it has huge numbers of innovations that come through, huge numbers of startups. We see that coming through in the filings, and then they get bought out. they fail to either fail to grow, so the innovation dies, and of course it's not lost, the innovation, someone else can take it up, but the value and the effort and the public money often that's gone into funding that is effectively lost, or it's bought out by a large corporation, and then of course the country which may have funded that is then paying a license fee to use the technology, which was originally seed funded by public funding. So I think that's it's not a new problem. I was involved in a study in the UK Prime Minister's office 20 years ago, and that was the problem that was identified. It's identified in the IEA report as well. So really, that's the big issue to really try and change, really capitalize on that public funded research and really getting it through, so it drives that innovation and we all benefit from it through better technology, cleaner technology, cheaper technology.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many examples of that happening across the world. Perhaps the most recent one is Northvolt, the battery company that raised billions of dollars here in Europe, and then now most of its assets have been sold to an American battery company. So we'll see where that innovation goes. The hard physical assets are still in the same places. There's still a battery factory in Europe and others that need to be built. But maybe one last thing to end on, because we are coming towards the end of the hour. There's a coffee break after this, and then breakout sessions. But we are here where the whole aim of the forum is to make conversations across the barriers, across government and entrepreneurs, across investors and entrepreneurs, across investors and government. I invited the panel of investors and entrepreneurs to leave the audience with things they would want for their projects to become success stories. Maybe I can turn that back to you. What is it that you think you can do to open a channel of conversation with these innovators and investors that would allow you to speed up the work that you are doing in your ministries now, and what kind of route should they take if they are interested in giving you direct feedback? I can start with you.
I think our job is to give policy certainty. We see governments changing and having radical shifts in the policies they have towards different technologies, and it just makes it incredibly hard for startups or VCs to allocate capital when you don't know what the framework is for commercializing that technology. And so one of the things that we are really trying to do is to create long-term policy certainty, because I think if we can create long-term policy certainty, the private sector will do its bit, and it will find the right ways to exploit the opportunities. But when we have tax credits on 1 year and tax credits off the next year, or we support technologies with PPAs 1 year and we take them away the next year, it just is incredibly hard for particularly the venture area to be properly allocating capital. So that's on us. We have to do a better job on that.
Right. Yeah, and Minister Ausland, I mean, what kind of communication channels do you have to get feedback from the private sector, from investors, to try and progress on the goals that the government has?
I think in Norway we have a good conversation with the industry. It's a close cooperation, and we have an open door every day in my office to speak to the industry. It's really important. But I agree with my colleague here. The political risk is a challenge in these days. So we have to bring down the political risk that we see. And also in the national debate in Norway, we have quite different meanings about things that when we're thinking of the way of going forward. But I think the first panels have some interesting views, and especially if we don't act today, what is the situation in 10 years? We have to act today together with industry, build long-term framework for investments, having new solutions for the new questions that we see on the table. So long-term work together with the industry is quite important. So everyone who wants to speak about that is welcome to speak to me.
Great.
And I have an open door every day.
Wonderful. Minister Wandai, how our dialogue with industry a channel for you in Kenya? What can they do?
First and foremost, we have established a very robust renewable energy directorate in the ministry that continues to engage very, very proactively with the potential investors, especially in the private sector, but also keeping an open channel with our foreign missions so that we have an all-inclusive approach to the matter of investment. We've gone further as a country and established what we call special economic zones, whereupon if the investors were to come calling and they are encouraged to, of course, do so, then they would get a lot of what we would call exceptions in terms of taxes and so on and so forth. So we have got a very, very elaborate mechanism to continue engaging with potential investors. But more importantly, we keep our doors as open as possible, as government and also as a country.
Thank you. Mr. Rowan, any final thoughts on the state of energy innovation before we let everybody get a break and coffee?
Yeah, I don't understand between everyone and coffee, but picking up on the comments that have been made, we have a huge data set which is available on our website, so use that data talking about how people can make a positive difference and feed in. We have the new European Observatory on patents, which we set up in 2023 in response to this increased strategic interest. So there's loads of data out there, loads of reports. If you think there are the areas of technology we should be looking at and doing those reports, then let us know. And also just on a final plug, we're very aware that patenting is costly. So just last April, we put a 30% discount for micro-enterprises, startups and universities, and already we see 10 million saved. I know it's only 10 million euros, but hopefully 10 million euros to those micro-enterprises is starting to make a difference as well. So if there are policy things you think we can do, I don't even have a door, I'm an open plan. So my open plan desk is always open, so please feel free to contact me if you have any ideas.
Thank you very much for your insights. So it's a coffee break. There are breakout sessions afterwards, and the rooms are on your right-hand side as you exit.